I was working the night shift, doing janitorial work for the city's transit system. The subway was practically empty after midnight, just a few trains running through on their way back to the depot. I was assigned to clean the platform and locker rooms at Emerson Station, one of the oldest and least used in the system. Emerson had been closed to the public for years. Supposedly, a structural collapse in the late 1930s had caused serious damage to the main tunnel, and the city never bothered to repair it. There were other stations nearby, so most people didn't even notice Emerson was gone. But those of us who worked the night shift knew it was still there, silent, tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the main subway lines. People avoided Emerson, even those who worked in the transit system. There were whispers, stories told in low voices by workers who'd been around for years. They'd say that Emerson was haunted, that strange things happened there late at night, that the lights sometimes turned on by themselves. I used to laugh off the stories, brushing them aside as just tall tales. But the moment I stepped foot there alone, I felt it, the suffocating darkness, the weight of something watching. That night, I arrived at Emerson just after midnight. I walked down the grimy stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty station. The air was damp and cold, and a strange smell lingered in the stale air, something like mildew, mixed with an earthy, metallic scent that made my skin crawl. I started my routine, sweeping debris from the floor, emptying trash cans, and wiping down the benches. I told myself the stories were just in my head, that there was nothing to be afraid of. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, an instinct that told me to keep glancing over my shoulder. As I was sweeping near the edge of the platform, I heard it, the distant rumble of a train. I paused, frowning. According to my schedule, no train should be coming through Emerson until 5 a.m. at the earliest. I double-checked my phone, scrolling through the transit app just to make sure I wasn't mistaken. The rumble grew louder, the distinct clatter of wheels on rails echoing through the empty station. I stepped closer to the edge of the platform, squinting down the dark tunnel. A light was approaching, cutting through the shadows. But as the train drew closer, I felt a strange sensation, like ice sliding down my spine. The train wasn't on the schedule, because it wasn't a modern train. The train that pulled up to the platform was old. Not just outdated, but ancient, like something from the early 1900s. Its paint was peeling, the windows were dusty and yellowed, and the exterior was marked with spots of rust. The train's headlights glowed a faint, sickly yellow, and its cars clattered and squealed as they slowed to a stop. I stood frozen in place, watching as the doors hissed open. I expected to see an empty train, maybe some broken-down relic being moved from one storage facility to another. But as I looked inside, my stomach twisted. The train was filled with passengers. They sat perfectly still, facing forward, their faces blank and expressionless. Every single one of them was dressed in old-fashioned clothing, dark coats, wide-brimmed hats, gloves, some even wearing veils that concealed their eyes. They looked like they belonged to a different time, as if they'd been plucked straight out of an old photograph. A shiver ran down my spine. Just as I was about to turn away, one of them moved. A woman near the front turned her head slowly, her pale, hollow eyes locking onto mine. I felt a jolt of fear as she stared, her gaze unblinking, her mouth slightly open, as though she were trying to speak. I took a step back, but before I could move further, the conductor stepped out of the train. He wore a dark, old-fashioned uniform with brass buttons that glinted faintly under the flickering lights. A peaked cap was pulled low over his eyes, casting his face in shadow. He glanced at me, his face partially obscured, and I felt my stomach churn. His features seemed distorted, as though I were looking at him through warped glass. "Are you coming aboard?" he asked in a low, hollow voice that echoed across the empty platform. "No," I stammered, my voice shaking. I'm just cleaning." The conductor tilted his head slightly, and his mouth twisted into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "All aboard," he said, louder this time, his voice reverberating through the station, sounding somehow both far away and too close. As he spoke, every passenger on the train turned in unison, their empty, glassy eyes fixed on me. I could feel an invisible pull, something drawing me toward the train, as though it were calling me, beckoning me to step inside. I fought against it, my feet rooted to the platform, but my body seemed to betray me, edging forward against my will. I don't know how, but I managed to snap out of it, stumbling backward, gasping for air. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs felt weak, numb. As I turned, ready to bolt for the exit, the loudspeaker crackled to life, blaring through the station with harsh, distorted voice. "Last train departing Emerson Station." The announcement jolted me out of my stupor, and I sprinted down the platform, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the hissing of the doors closing behind me, the clatter of the wheels as the train started moving again. I glanced over my shoulder, just in time to see the train pulling away, the passengers still staring out the windows, their hollow eyes fixed on me as they disappeared into the tunnel. I reached the end of the platform, gasping for breath, and stumbled up the stairs, desperate to put distance between myself and that cursed train. I didn't stop running until I was out of the station, back in the cold, open air. The moment I felt the city lights around me, I pulled out my phone to call my supervisor, but I stopped when I noticed something on my hands. They were covered in a fine layer of ash. I tried to wipe it off, but it wouldn't come off. The gray powdery residue clung to my skin, coating my fingers, filling the lines on my palms. My mind raced, recalling the strange metallic smell that had lingered in the air when I first entered the station. It hadn't been mildew. It had been the smell of old, burnt wood, or something worse. When I finally made it home, I scrubbed my hands until they were raw, but the sensation of the ash wouldn't go away. I lay in bed that night, wide awake, haunted by the faces of the passengers, the woman's hollow gaze, the conductor's twisted smile. The nightmares started a few nights later. In my dreams, I was back on the platform, staring at the train as it pulled up. Only this time, the passengers weren't sitting still. They were moving, jerking, shuddering, their heads turning toward me as their mouths opened in silent screams. The conductor would step out, his face hidden in shadow, and he would hold out his hand, beckoning me forward. His voice would echo in my mind, a whisper that grew louder until it was a scream. "Come aboard." I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my hands still feeling coated in ash. After a week of sleepless nights, I returned to Emerson Station. I couldn't explain why. I just knew I had to go back. Maybe I thought I could find something, some clue to explain what I'd seen. The station was deserted, as it always was. I walked slowly down the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the empty space. The platform was silent, the air thick and cold, the smell of ash faint but unmistakable. As I stood there, alone on the platform, I felt a familiar rumble beneath my feet. My heart pounded as a light appeared in the tunnel, growing brighter as the train approached. I wanted to run, but my feet were frozen in place. The train pulled up, its doors hissing open. A conductor stepped out, his face obscured in shadow. "Are you coming aboard?" he asked, his voice soft, inviting. And this time, I didn't say no. I stepped forward, crossing the threshold, and as the doors closed behind me, I saw the faces of the passengers turn toward me, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted in silent screams. The train pulled away, disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel, and I was never seen again.